Good evening, everybody. I got to tell you, in 4 years of working on parent ed programs, this is the biggest crowd we've ever had. So thank you for coming out tonight, and thank you for all your support of the PTSA. It's your generosity that makes programs like this possible. One quick story. This afternoon I was in a store, and I was pulling out my wallet, and I had to pull out my copy of this book to get to my wallet, and the person helping me said, "What's that book? Where'd you get that book? Can I see that book?" And I said, "Sure, it's a really good book." And and she says, "Oh, this looks great. I'm so overwhelmed." And I said, "Well, we're going to come tonight at Pally, and if you're here, wave." But that is pretty much how I felt when I first heard about this book. I'm a parent of a senior, first time, and even being relatively well prepared, because I've read a number of books about college applications and I've done programs on it, and it's still pretty overwhelming. And there's a lot to know, and what our real goal here tonight is to bring the anxiety down with insight and information. We are so fortunate to have two amazing speakers tonight that wrote, in my mind, the definitive book on college admissions. I've read a bunch of them, and this is, I swear I don't get a percentage or anything. This is the best book I've ever read. It is easy to read, easy to comprehend. You can skip to a chapter as you need it. You don't have to read it at one setting, but it's a book you pick up and put down, and it is amazingly insightful with fabulous resources. The handout, if those of you that picked it up, is an example of the kind of resources you'll find in the book and on their website. And it's the best list of resources I've ever seen on College App. Okay? So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker. Christine Van de Velde is actually, just like you, a Palo Alto parent. But she's a survivor. She's also, her daughter is a senior in college right now. Survived, and she appears to be relatively sane even after writing a book. And she wrote the book. She's also a journalist who's written in USA Today, Parenting Magazine, San Francisco Chronicle. But this is the book she wished she had had. She decided to write it. Our second speaker is Robin Mamlet, who was the Dean of Admissions at Stanford, Swarthmore and Sarah Lawrence. And how many different applications did you read in that time? Something like 100,000 applications. So safe to say she's got some insight about the whole process. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Christine, who will be our first speaker, be followed by Robin, and then we're going to have a very rich Q&A. So thank you very much and enjoy.
And let me know if you can't hear me, if the mic is not good enough. Okay. Hello? Does that work? 1, 2, 3?
Heather, you're killing us.
Yeah.
It's on. We got it. We got it. We appreciate the help.
Do you know, I feel like the bands where the opening act is better than the featured presentation after Phil's introduction. How's that? Okay, great.
Sure that's okay?
Thank you to all of you for hosting us tonight. We're really thrilled to be here and talk about the book that we co-authored. Robin and I were recently talking to the head of a speakers bureau, and she said that there are 3 subjects that parents will come out through rain, snow, sleet, and dead of night to hear about. And I'm glad the weather cleared up, but we've still got a full house, because those 3 subjects are sex, drugs, and college admission. So I'm going to start tonight by telling you a little bit about the book that we wrote and why I wrote it. 5 years ago, I was sitting where you are. My daughter was starting the college application process, and I wanted to not only talk the talk, but walk the walk of letting it be her process and her journey. And as a journalist, my process for learning about something then was to over-research it. I have kind of an academic approach. So I went to the bookstore to find the book that would tell me about the college application process. And I couldn't find one comprehensive book written by a true expert. I found lots of thin edge of the wedge books and idiosyncratic how-tos that told you about essays and test taking, and I thought, okay, I don't want to know that much about college admissions, although of course in the process of writing this book, I've learned much more. But the books that really drove me crazy were the how-to books that were the secret sauce books. The books that had the titles like What the Colleges Don't Tell You, or The 10 Steps to Get Into Harvard. And I really resented those books as a parent, and I'm sure students do too, because they make you afraid about the process and your prospects and the prospects of your children. And I felt that they were trying to send me running into the arms of a private counselor, and lo and behold, most of them are written by private counselors. And even worse, most of the people who'd had any experience as an admission person had it at entry-level positions. So, as Maureen said, I wrote the book that I wish I had had when my daughter applied to college. And the book I wish I had had was a book I'll bet that a lot of you are familiar with, What to Expect When You're Expecting. How many people know that book? Okay. So that was our template. Robin and I decided that we would write What to Expect When You're Expecting for Applying to College. We decided we would tell parents and students absolutely everything we could possibly think of about the application process. And we would tell them step by step, organized, to kind of meet the timeline, the way you think about things going through the process, and in detail. And in the process, we also wanted to debunk a lot of the myths and misinformation that you hear not only from the New York Times, but also in the carpool lane. You know, like, do you have to have community service in your extracurricular activity list? And do you have to go to Shanghai to write a good essay? I'm sure many of you saw that New York Times article quite a few weeks ago. So our goal was threefold for the book. The book would provide students and parents enough information to calm down and to understand the appropriate roles for each of them in the process. And it would also be comprehensive. We wanted it to contemplate what all of you and your children were thinking about from the moment you start thinking about college in high school, and up to the moment when maybe you're getting ready to pack the car and go off to the college of your son or daughter's choice. And finally, we wanted it to be expert. Because of the explosion of information about college admission in the press, the process has moved further and further away from the true experts like Robin. So you have even high school seniors blogging their experiences. And it's fine for them to blog their experiences, but that's not reliable information in terms of understanding the process. So in addition to Robin, we talked to more than 50 deans of admission from across the country, a variety of institutions, who also contributed their advice to the book. Beyond that, we talked to a number of other educators and experts, the head of the SAT, the head of the ACT, the head of the Common App. And then we got some parenting experts like Mike Riera, who wrote Uncommon Sense for Parents of Teenagers, and Rosalind Wiseman, who wrote Queen Bees and Wannabes, because even parents can use some tips and sound bites to get through the process as well. So I got to do what a lot of parents and students might like to do. I got to call up over 130 experts and talk to them at length, in addition to talking to Robin every single day for about 18 months. So I learned a lot, and tonight I'm going to tell you about three of the most surprising things that I learned as a parent and as a journalist. And I'm going to frame them as pieces of advice for kids who are applying to college. And the first piece of advice is read, read, read. There are many theories about education. There's one fact. The key to doing well in school and doing well in the college application process is reading. Every dean, the head of the ACT and SAT, every other educator and expert talked about the importance of reading as preparation for the college application process. So the best feeder school to the college of your choice is Amazon.com and your local library. And here's why this was surprising to me, though. As parents and students, you get wound up, I think, about test scores and essay and extracurricular activities, but the paramount thing that you need to remember about the application process is that students are being evaluated to enter a learning community. So the most important part of the application is not what you did this summer. It's your grades and the courses that you take. And first and foremost, what the colleges want to know about a student is what they're like as a learner. And the best way to improve learning is by reading. And it doesn't matter what you read. You can read graphic novels or Dostoevsky. It improves grades, it improves test scores, and it's the best predictor of whether a student will succeed in college. So as you can see, it's like this is basic stuff that people forget about in the explosion of information. The second piece of advice is details, details, details. I wrote this sentence more often than any other sentence in a book of 416 pages. One of the great things about higher education is that there are more than 2,600 four-year colleges and universities. So there's a college for everyone. That's also one of the drawbacks, because many aspects of applying, the forms, the supplements, recommendation letters, essays, financial aid deadlines, can all be different in their details at each one of those schools. And students are, or should be, applying to 6 to 8 or 10 schools. So they're having to do the research into what exactly is required for all those schools. I think it's one of the big but really underestimated reasons for a lot of the stress in the process. It stressed me out when I was researching the book. I would go to the Common App and see that 2 recommendation letters were required. And then sometimes you can go a little further in the Common App and see that at Caltech, okay, they want these 2 kinds of recommendation letters. Other times you have to go to that Caltech site and dig a little deeper there. So, kids are juggling a lot of pieces of information. But here's why this mundane but often repeated piece of advice is so important and was so surprising to me. Students need to visit the website of each college to which they are applying, because applying to college is in no small part about following directions. Talk about getting back to basics. The first time Robin said this to me, I was really startled, but it was not the last time it was said to me. The deans that we interviewed said it repeatedly. So filling out the common application properly, submitting a recommendation letter on time, all of this tells an admission officer a lot about a student. They are paying attention. And the other thing that they said to me is students cannot underestimate what they are telling a college at every point in the process. And this is important from another standpoint too, this idea of all the detail. And that is that parents need to realize, I think, and I did not, how much work it is to apply to college. And it gets compared to taking an additional AP course. And I think that we as parents would be well served by remembering how much work it is. And the last piece of advice is apply, apply, apply for financial aid. The single biggest mistake families make in the application process is failing to apply for financial aid. In 2006, the American Center for Education did a study, and they found that 1.8 million students who would have qualified for federal financial aid had failed to apply. So apply. And there's one more small thing about financial aid that I want to say too, and that is that don't assume that expensive colleges are out of reach before you do a little bit of investigation about the financial aid policy of the school, because more expensive colleges can actually be cheaper because they have stronger aid programs. In closing, there's a parent-to-parent thought I'd like to leave you with, and that is studies have shown that parents are the strongest influences in the selection of colleges, regardless of how you may feel at any point during junior or senior year. And by the way, the mother is the dominant parent. We'd like that. At my daughter's high school each year, at the end of the school term, all the seniors fill out a questionnaire for the administration. And the kids love this. They're halfway out the door, they've got their college acceptances, and they're going to tell the administration the truth. Remember when you knew the truth? Anyway, one of the things the students are asked about in the questionnaire is their college application process. And regardless of what year it is, when the feedback comes back each year, there's a refrain. And this refrain, when you read it, this kind of breaks your heart. It says, I hope my parents are proud of me. I hope I didn't disappoint my parents with where I applied to college. I hope my parents were happy about where I got into college. So speaking parent to parent, I'd just like to say, tread lightly when talking college with your son or daughter, because they're listening. And I want to leave you with a thought from Michael Thompson, who's a psychologist. She's one of the contributors in our book. He said this, I think, very eloquently, and it really touched me. He said, having been a therapist for 30 plus years, I believe that the internal bottom line for children is love for their parents. It's not an uncomplicated love or an easy love, but it is the bottom line. So parents should be aware that asking a child to look at a college is rarely a casual thing. It goes right to the kid's bottom line. So thank you very much. And I'm going to turn.
Just one quick point. When you came in, those of you that are at the back, there are seats upstairs. Welcome you to go up there if you'd like. But we passed out question cards. We're going to have a few people walking through. If you've already written down some questions, we're going to start collecting them very quietly during this session. We'll also have, so we're going to try and answer as many questions as possible. We'll have some time for open mic as well, for those of you that looks like we might have run out of question cards. But if somebody's walking up and down, if you've got a question, pass it down to them. We'll be collecting them. Thank you. And I'll introduce Robin.
Thank you. Thanks, Maureen, and good evening. Can you all hear me? Great. It's I'm really delighted to be here tonight. I will fess up right at the start that when I lived in Palo Alto, I was on the gun side of town. But I spent a few evenings here, and I'm really glad to be here, and it feels like home. When I was working in admissions, I gave up many nights and weekends to read applications, and it wasn't always easy, but I did so because I knew that at the end of that process, I was going to have a chance to meet some of the students that I had learned to come to know through their applications. And back when I was reading files, you know, it was real paper. And I used to call them my flat friends because I spent so much more time with them than I did with any real friends. My husband had another name for them, which I won't share. But when Christine and I started writing this book, I found myself again giving up many nights and weekends. And this time I did it because I hope to one day have the chance to speak with audiences like this one. So I'm thrilled to see you all. Let me just quickly ask, can you raise your hand if you're a student? I just want a sense of how many of you there are in the room. Okay, that's really helpful. So forgive me then, but I'm going to mostly talk to parents tonight. I'll have a few words for you as well, but mostly to parents. And when all of you, though, students or parents, leave at the end of the evening, Christine and I hope that you walk out this door feeling armed with information, feeling inoculated against going crazy under the pressure, and inspired to approach the college application process with sanity. So armed, inoculated, and inspired. So in about an hour or so, you can let us know how we did. Now, armed, what I'd like to do tonight is tell you a little bit about why the college application process works the way it does, with the hope that the process itself will then be more understandable to you. And both Christine and I believe that the way we can be absolutely most helpful to students and parents is to try to let you know some of the reasons why the most important thing students can do in this process as they apply to college is to be themselves. We talk a lot about this in the book, about the importance of being authentic. So let me say a little bit more about being authentic. We all know some of the reasons that this process can be scarier than it really has to be. The one I hear most often is that students believe that they can only prepare successful applications if colleges will tell them exactly what they're looking for. And when colleges don't give such explicit instructions, it must be proof that the process is totally random, or that it must be proof that there's a secret. And if you can just find out what they want, then you can be that, and then you can get in. So let me tell you that nothing can be further from the truth. A fully transparent process where everyone can understand clear rules sounds like an ideal system, but the truth is that the rules are not simple, and they are always changing. So trust me when I say that it's not because colleges are out to trick you or that they find pleasure in keeping you in the dark. There are actually some very good reasons why it's not always in the college's best interest for their priorities to be completely transparent. So here's one reason. Imagine if, for just a minute, that instead of me up here, you have the dean of admission from your student's first choice school. And imagine that she announces that this year her college is looking to admit several tap dancing classics majors this year. Now, if you heard about the need for tap dancing classicists, you might feel some pressure to race home tonight and suggest to your students that they include something about how much they love Greek and Latin poetry while in the dance studio. You know, they're sort of conjugating verbs while they shuffle off to Buffalo. So the problem is that students who do love classics and tap dancing should be writing about that anyway. And students who don't should never write such an essay just because they think that that's what a college wants to see. It could be that that college also wants to see someone who will make her dorm's cluster of rooms truly gel. And what if that was the person that your daughter, for example, truly was? And instead of presenting that side of her, she's busy presenting herself as a Shirley Temple reciting Ovid. And the person who really tap dances and has taken fifth year Latin or Greek is going to get in before she is. And so your student has just hurt herself in the process. She actively has hurt herself. So as soon as a college divulges what their institutional priorities are in a given year, and some of these, by the way, can change week to week because things on a college campus are always changing and shifting, it's way too tempting for applicants to try and force their true identities into these little boxes. And when students' applications do not reflect who they truly are, there's no chance for them to present their authentic selves. And even more than impressive test scores or great transcripts or fantastic essays, colleges are looking for authenticity. Not the appearance of authenticity, not the packaging of authenticity, not the strategy of authenticity, just authenticity, plain and simple. So why is that? Well, a bunch of reasons. Among them, because honesty is important to admission deans. Also because admission deans typically believe that students who know what they want and who they are have a better chance of being successful in college. And also because if they detect exaggeration or pretense or packaging, how do they know which parts of the application are real and which are not? So the best thing to do, despite all the messages that you're getting about New York Times, in the New York Times or wherever, is to approach this with authenticity. And so let me suggest 3 things for you to be aware of that might be helpful to you. First, the students who do best in this process have figured out not what the college wants as their starting point, but what they want. They've taken the time to learn about themselves. It's hard work. It's not always fun work. But they have asked themselves the tough questions that help them emerge with a strong understanding of themselves. For example, when I was dean at Sarah Lawrence, just outside New York City, students would often tell me that they wanted to go to college in or near New York, and so they were applying to Sarah Lawrence and NYU. Let's see. Classes capped at 12, Sarah Lawrence. Really large lectures, NYU. 12 large lectures, and you'd say, wonder how much they've really thought about this. The most compelling candidates to me as dean were those who knew that they would thrive in Sarah Lawrence's personalized academic environment. They knew that about themselves. Would we take a student with a weaker transcript who understood what we were about and really wanted that over somebody who was stronger but appeared to be unaware of how our school worked? Absolutely. So step one, you have to think about who you are. You have to encourage your students to think about who they are and really delve deep and absolutely come up with why they're going to college, how they learned best. We have lists of questions in the book. Probably your counselors have lists of questions as well. So step one, learn about yourself or help your students learn about themselves. Step two, colleges have their own agendas that have absolutely nothing to do with any of us. They're businesses. So they have payrolls to meet, they have facilities to maintain, they have programs to mount, they have trustees to satisfy, they have faculty and staff to keep motivated and at least reasonably happy, and they have laws to observe. And they also each have a mission, and they meet that mission in different ways. And the more students who are applying understand what a college's mission is, the better. The more that they, again, take the time to figure out what's important to them, think about that, and then look at colleges that match that through understanding that college's mission, the better they will do, and that will come through in their applications. Admission officers will see that in their essays, they'll see that in their interviews, they'll see that in their letters of recommendation. So remember my Sarah Lawrence story and encourage your students to think first about what they want and then about the kinds of colleges that have that. Third, here is something that I want you to keep in mind. The admission process that selective colleges use is the process that you would design if you were to design an admission process where there were more qualified candidates than there were spaces in the class. Not necessarily down to every detail, but overall, if colleges are going to factor in more than just grades and scores, this is how you do it. You do it by looking at essays, you look at it by looking at how students spend their time, at what their teachers and counselors say about them, at what they care about, and what kind of person they want to become. By using people to review applications and not machines, despite that Connect EDU article in the Atlantic Monthly. By taking the extraordinary amount of time and expense the process requires, rather than by sticking all the names of the qualified candidates in a box and having a lottery. Most colleges have policies, admission policies that reflect their missions. So Claremont McKenna College, students should have held some positions of leadership. Reed College, students had better be very bright, very intellectually engaged. And then, so long as they're a good person, the rest not so much. Just doesn't matter to them. Reed is very, very clear about that. And then there are variations on the theme. So when I was dean at Stanford, there were students who thought that scores should play a much bigger role in the process. And what I found was that those were generally the students who had very high scores. Oftentimes their scores were higher than their grades. Then the students who thought that grades should count the most, they had high grades and sometimes less high scores. The students who thought special talents should weigh the most were very talented. And the students who had none of the above, well, they thought that the process should rest most heavily on personal qualities. So what most colleges try to do is have some kind of a balance of all of those. And The trick is, and this is the one trick I have for you, to be honest and be yourself, and to encourage your students to do so as well. Now, Christine and I want you to leave here with the fortitude and the armor to resist all the times you're going to encounter in this process scary messages that will divert you from being true to yourself or from feeling that your student should be doing the same. We get this. Normally calm, sane people start to go crazy as junior year approaches. It's like the flu. You find yourself thinking that if everyone else is getting an essay coach, maybe you're going to be at a disadvantage if you don't. Everyone else is going to a developing country to establish world peace in one summer, and you're working as a lifeguard, and you need to make your flight reservations. Everyone else is scrambling to find as many college trustees as they can possibly find to put in a word for them, and you'd better get on that telephone pronto. And we would say, stop. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to say to yourself that if my student goes through this process in an authentic way, he or she cannot fail. If they go through the process in an authentic way, they can't fail. Now, on the airplane yesterday, I was trying to think of something just a little more catchy than that, as your sort of inoculation against going crazy. You know, when someone says something to you and your heart goes to your throat and you think, oh my God, I got to race home and fork over, you know, a year of college tuition to get them in to work with this one counselor, or whatever it is. Your inoculation against rewriting your daughter's essay, for example, or making your son memorize different lines that you've written down before his college interview so that he can parrot them back to his interviewer while sort of pausing at key places to think of his next brilliant word. So what will be the phrase that you will say to yourself when you feel your anxiety mounting and you can feel yourself sort of starting to lose it? How many of you have seen The Help? Okay. It's a great movie. I really recommend it. And for those of you who have, remember the mantra that one of the main characters repeats to the child that she cares for? Remember? So you know what I'm about to say, right? I is kind, I is intelligent, I is important, right? Well, it's the same thing here. Your students are kind, they are intelligent, they are important. Each of the students in the room tonight, you're good people, you are smart people, you're important people. You need to be who you are. There is no need to be anybody else. And in fact, doing so can really mess you up. So your mantra for students, I am kind, I am intelligent, I am important. I loved that. And for parents, my student is kind, he is intelligent, he is important. Students, I wish you the best of luck, those of you who are here. I know that in many ways you are already prepared for college. And while I can't tell you tonight which specific colleges are going to admit you, because no one can, I do know that with the support of everyone in this room, you'll be successful, not by being perfect, but by being real. Thank you all.
And one more thing. I know all of us in Palo Alto probably have Steve Jobs on our mind tonight. And he was famous, if you didn't know, for going out on stage and giving Apple's numbers for the year and pretending to walk off and saying, oh, one more thing, and then giving you the iPad or something else terrific. And I don't know if you remember that he had what has become an iconic speech at the Stanford commencement a few years ago. And we want to read you a couple lines from that because it is terrific advice for students applying to college. He said, your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life. Don't be trapped by dogma, which is living with the results of other people's thinking. Don't let the noise of others' opinions drown out your own inner voice. And most important, have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's more than working. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move to the Q&A. This is where you're going to be in charge of the rest of the agenda. I'd like to introduce the third panelist, though. We decided we wanted to have a Pali expert on our panel as well. Most of you probably know Sandra Chernabori. Sandra's one of our fabulous college and career counselors, and we're very fortunate to have both she and Alice here tonight to answer Pali questions that are appropriate. We're trying to keep the emphasis on the expertise of the two authors, but we certainly recognize we'll probably have some Pali-specific stuff too. So while I want to thank the three people that have been helping me collect the questions, I'm going to start, while they bring those up to me, I'm going to start with a few questions that were submitted to me in advance, just to get things going. Okay, this is one I thought about before. How do colleges view students with very high test scores, but a low B GPA? Will the scores give them an edge?
You're going to hate this answer by the end of tonight, I guarantee it. But it depends on the college. So for some colleges, what they're going to say is, this is a student who, okay, so let me start by saying, it depends on the pattern of your grades. But let's say you've got a low GPA, but your grades are trending up. So what they're going to say is, oh, really bright student who is just now coming into his own. Little study. Others are going to say, not working up to potential, high school didn't work miracles, and we don't work miracles either. So it depends on the college. The other thing is the pattern that your grades make matters. If they're shifting, you want them going up, not going down, right, as you progress through high school. So it makes a big difference.
That's the answer I give. It depends on college.
Okay, another question we've got is it ever a good idea for a parent to attend a college session at their student's high school? Let's say the kid can't get out of class for some reason, or the parent thinks the kid can't get out of class. Is it ever okay for the parent to actually attend the college session at the high school at Pali and even sign in for the kid as the kid?
Okay, never masquerade as your student. Never. You know, actually, when we were starting to talk about writing a book together, I swear this happened. So it was New Year's Day, and over there in that gun district, I had a few friends over, and a couple of them brought friends. I'll just say that. They weren't all my friends. But one of the fathers, who wasn't my friend, came up and said to me, well, I figured this out. So what I did is I opened up an email account as my daughter. And then I wrote to all the colleges. But you know, I was hurt because they like to see that. Well, that is just not a good idea. And first of all, like, they're that stupid. I mean, 17-year-old, 50-year-old, they sound a little different. So, yeah, never masquerade as your student. I understand the policy here is that you can be a silent observer of those, and I think that's fine. I think if you are not silent, that's a problem. Because unless you're the only one there, because sometimes, it's just you and the college rep, and they are so thrilled to see you because, they're going to 5 schools a day, and, they don't see anyone, and they've schlepped all the way over here from not knowing the roads, and they just are so thankful to see someone. So that's a good thing, too.
Okay. Let's see. If a student is applying early decision, will the college be less likely to offer merit aid?
Okay. So, again, it depends on the college. So, Some colleges feel very, very strongly that if a student would have gotten merit aid applying regular decision, they should get it applying early. And they're going to make sure that they award aid accordingly. I have to say, I think the majority of colleges now are not flush, and so they may not do that. I think there's a group of colleges that have really strong endowments, and they're able to afford that kind of a principal. And then I would say the majority of colleges are having to make very tough decisions about what they do with their money, and they would be more inclined to use merit for students who need it to help encourage them to enroll.
Here's one that's going to get the crowd going. My perception, whether it's true or not, is that it can actually, in some cases, be a disadvantage to go to Pally or gun. That there's actually, at times, a Pally gun penalty, and that we're held to different standards. When I've looked at scattergrams of average GPAs and test scores and compare them, who's been accepted at college, I compare them to the FIS guide or other things, it appears that we are held to a higher standard. Is that true?
I don't believe that's true. I'm really, really honest with you. There's a reason why your scattergram looks different than the institution's overall scattergram. Now, so here's part of the concept. One of the reasons why your scores are as high as they are is because you're truly brilliant. But another reason is because you have had great privileges. And so the scattergrams reflect everybody. And here's the reality. SAT scores are positively correlated with parental income. So if you read an application knowing the pattern of how people test in this country, and you don't truly believe that those with less money are less bright, then you're actually going to factor that kind of thing in as you read a file. Does that mean it's harder to get in if you're from Pally? I don't think so. It means that you are trying to factor in everything you know about testing as you look at each student's application. The other thing is, you don't know who those other students are that are lower on that scattergram than you are. You don't know how many of them are contributing special talents that aren't ample in your particular school, or where your best football players are actually going somewhere else rather than here, or whatever it is. You just don't know the whole picture, but that scattergram includes so many different kinds of variables in it. And so if you just compare yours to the institution, it's just very misleading.
And I would add that some scattergrams actually show the reverse. It really depends on the college. There are some colleges for which you will look at the numbers in the FIS guide and it will look like it's a little bit of a stretch or out of your reach. But if you look on the scattergram, you'll notice that Pally students who were admitted had a little bit lower GPA and lower test scores. So it really depends on the college.
Okay, should students ask professional people to read and or edit their essays for their college application, and as a professional coach suggested?
Let me see if I have this question right. A professional coach said you should get somebody professional to edit your essays. Is that right?
I think the question is, should parents hire specialized help for their children their teenagers to either read and or edit their essays, and in general give them counseling support? Outside of Sandra.
I'm going to take a little rest here.
in the book, we came down to the side of not using a professional essay coach for a variety of reasons. There are not very many good ones. The hand of a professional coach in a student's essay can obscure who the student is. It also, a lot of admission deans can perform a parlor trick of looking at your SAT score in your essay and predict, and they'll know if there's a disconnect. They can talk to you and tell you probably within, what is it, like 25 points, 50 points, what your SAT score is. So if they look at your SAT score and then they look at the essay and see the disconnect there, that's not going to help you in the application process. But the essay is a great opportunity for the students to, in essence, stand before the admissions committee and tell them who they are. Now, if you have someone in your family who's a writer, an aunt who's an editor at the newspaper, at the very, very end of the process, you might want to have them look at the essay for grammar, general communication skills, and detail. But I think it's best to keep everybody's hands off the essay, aside from obviously consulting with your counseling department and your teachers in the school who understand what the colleges want and understand, what kind of writing they expect from students.
And I would just add for students to be really cautious about getting feedback from lots and lots of people, because what happens is you lose your voice. There are so many people giving you feedback and sometimes contradicting messages that you will get overwhelmed, and the essence of you is lost in the essay. So you need to find someone that you trust. That can be your teacher, it can be your college advisor, it could be someone else outside of this process. But I hesitate to have you have too many people put their hands on the thing that's really the most distinguishing factor of you in this application.
So here's a good line. Where is the line? And the line is, to me, when the essay ceases to be entirely the student's in either word or thought for any part of it, it's crossed the line. So it's not that nobody should read it and give you some feedback, or nobody should say, what did you mean here? But when the writing itself is not the students in either thought or even a word, it's crossed that line.
Can I just say one more thing? I know it's sometimes hard to know where that line is as a parent when you care so much about your child and the outcome of this process. And one of the things we do in the book is we actually give you the sound bites that are off limits, the things that you should not be saying when you are looking at your child's essays. You have to look it up.
Okay, slightly different question, different topic, but does requesting financial aid hurt admission chances or not?
It depends on the college. So sorry. So here's what you want to know. You want to be asking colleges, are you need blind in the admission process? And what that means is that whether or not you're applying for financial aid either does not factor into the admission decision, they're need blind. Need sensitive or need aware means that it does. Now, there are a whole lot of places. I'm going to pick on Johns Hopkins just for a minute. Johns Hopkins, they will tell you, typically, we can be need sensitive. What does that mean? Not this last year, but the year before, they were entirely need blind. Just so happened that the students that they were admitting that year and their financial aid budget matched. Last year, for a very small number of the students that they were going to admit, they had to go back and pull some because they discovered that they tapped out of their budget. A very small number, very small percentage. So it it can mean very different things at very different places, but not only that, it can mean at the same place a different thing depending on the year. So you really have to talk to the individual college and learn as much as you can about what it means for them, and then go from there. But what I will say is, you know, if you're not going to apply because it's better to, either way, it's better to apply if you want that school and to apply for financial aid, and just make sure as you do that, that in addition, you all know the concept of applying to a range of schools, right? So you've got the schools that you're going, you know that you can get into, and you've got the schools that you might get into, and you might have one or two reaches. You need, if you're applying for financial aid and you're going to need that in order to go, you need to think about factoring in expense in the same way, right? So you would have some colleges that you know you can get into, and you know either that you will be able to afford them, or that you're going to qualify for some kind of a merit scholarship, or that they meet full need of all their admitted students. So you make sure that you've got some that you're going to get into and that you can pay for, or they can pay for you. And then you go from there.
I want to ask another kind of related question on that. With higher salaries and much higher housing expenses, do Palo Alto parents still qualify for financial aid, or do we get pushed out of the range?
You know, when I was at Stanford, I sure saw a lot of Palo Alto families applying for financial aid. And the other thing is that many colleges use the College Board profile, which is one of two forms that you would then fill out to apply for financial aid, and they have what is called an institutional methodology, which is different from the federal methodology. So federal methodology, that's what is used to determine state and federal aid, and then an institutional methodology is how they spend their own money. And typically, if they use the profile, not always, but typically, they have a cap on how much of your income would be counted as home equity. There's a ratio in there, so it doesn't go up to your full home equity.
Can I say one thing? I think this is a subject in which the media likes to write scare stories as well. And there was just one recently, parents penalized for savings. That and in fact that's false. It's much more based on income than savings. Number one, and now as of October, as most of you probably know through your counseling center, all colleges have to have these net price calculators on their website. That's a great tool to go to. It's a more authoritative tool than anything that you read in the headlines and take as a given. So I would encourage anybody who has questions to start there and see what the school says about its financial aid as opposed to what the headlines say about it.
Do you all know what she's talking about these net price calculators?
No. You're much more.
So there's a new law that colleges have to have on their websites. What is called it could be called a net price calculator, it could be a financial aid calculator, but basically you go to their website and you fill in a couple of, well, some colleges have more complicated ones or more complex ones or more nuanced ones than others. They don't have, the law does not say that the calculators have to be the same from school to school, just that you have to have one. So they can be a little bit different from one another, but the idea is you put in your income, your assets, a few other questions, and it will do basically a very rough calculation of how much aid you might be eligible for at that institution. And so it's just a wonderful way to get a very rough idea of whether or not you'll qualify or not. Of course, financial aid is a profession, and so ultimately professional financial aid people will look at your application and make a more nuanced determination, but this is going to be pretty good, at least giving you an idea of whether you're eligible or not and what that might look like.
In terms of the federal and state formula, you can use the FAFSA forecaster. So the free application for federal student aid is the government's version of the first line for applying for federal and state aid, and they have a forecaster, which is somewhat similar to this function. And based on the information, it will give you an idea of your family's expected contribution towards the cost of 1 year of college. So that will give you information specifically from the government aid, and then specific institutions can, depending on how nuanced the calculator is, can give you a better idea of how that would factor into their institutional aid.
Okay, thank you. We've got quite a few questions on this topic, which is it better to get an A in an easier class or get that B, oh my God, a 3.0 in a harder lane?
Okay, I'll say it because I haven't said it yet. It depends upon the college. It doesn't. When I spoke to the deans, when we interviewed the deans for the book, they often said that they preferred to see the students who challenged themselves, that they would rather have in their classrooms students who had gotten a B in a course that was challenging to them as opposed to an A in a course that was not challenging. But again, it depends upon the institutions. The more highly selective schools will tell you they want to see high grades in tough courses. You're going to have to talk to the institution, look at their mission statement, their grades and scores of their entering students, and calculate that into forming your list of schools.
I would just reiterate, the more selective the institution, the higher the expectation. Just ensure they'll have more applications, usually, to look for, and if in an otherwise equal pool, they're looking for students who've challenged themselves and done well and use that as a measure for potential success at their college. And so at some of the most selective schools, and we hate this answer, but not only do they want you to take the most challenging classes, but they want you to earn the best grades in them too.
Kind of building on that question, similar question is around, would it be better to have some extracurricular that's significant, play a varsity sport, and suffer the consequences in terms of grades, or be purely academic?
Depends on the college. You can always say this now, right? It depends on the college. It depends on the sport. It depends on how good you are at the sport. It depends on that place's policy for that sport for that year. So ultimately, remember the Steve Jobs, and you gotta live your life. You've gotta do what you believe is most important, and know that the places where you should get in are going to be seeing it similarly.
Okay, there's a few different questions on how can the admissions people possibly read all those flat friend files and really get to know the students. Is it realistic to think that they're actually getting to know each student?
They don't have lives. It's true. So that's what they do. And yes, they can do that. And they do it because they love it. They do it because they care about students, because they love 17, I know this sounds corny, but they love 17-year-olds. I'll tell you a story quickly, but when I was pregnant with my first child, every time I got pregnant, I took a new job. And so I was pregnant for the first time, and I went to a boarding school to do admissions. I figured, because they gave me a house on campus, and there was on-campus daycare. And what I found was that I really did not enjoy 6th and 7th graders. I just didn't like them so much. And I mean, my own were fine when they got to be that age, but in general, that was just not my favorite. And I loved 16, 17, 18-year-olds. These are people who devote their lives to this because they really They really love that age group. They really love what is going on for them at that point in their lives. They love the fact that they're becoming who they're going to be and the kind of impact they can make on the world and getting a chance to play some role in that. So yes, they can.
Turns out we've got a few questions about Stanford. If you don't mind, I'm going to acknowledge a few of these. Does Stanford, specifically, compare students from the same school, i.e. look at across Pali and perhaps Gunn, but not across schools? I suspect the question is asking, do you look at a pool of Pali kids and say, well, we can only take so many, so we're going to take the top, they're all National Merit Scholars? Or are you going to compare those kids, these kids, to kids in other schools that aren't nearly as competitive?
Okay, you're going to hate this answer. I have no idea. I know what we did when I was dean. I haven't been dean there since 2005. You have to ask the current Stanford staff. There's, no one. If somebody tries to answer that kind of question for you because they once worked at a place, you should run. Because who knows what you have to be working there now. You have to be on the inside now to be able to give you a sense of that. And so they're right across the street, and they do information sessions several times a day, and I would say go to them, ask.
And a kind of magic formula.
Sorry, we have a college fair on Monday. They'll be at the college fair. Monday night, 6:30 in the gym.
There you go.
Is there a formula for Stanford in terms of the number of AP classes?
I feel very confident in saying no.
Are you sure about that?
I feel, what was that TV show? Is that your final answer? No, I am not 100% certain. Ask them, that's probably a better idea. Yeah, I have to invoke my lifeline.
We have a couple questions on interviews. And the question is, given a choice, should a student do an interview and why? And in your opinion, what are some of the key messages or things a student should try to get across in an interview?
A student, if an interview is offered, a student should do it. Whether or not a school offers interviews is often based on the kind of school it is. If it's a small liberal arts school where most of the interaction is going to be in small classes between the student and an adult, they will want to see how a student interacts with an adult in that situation. If it's a large university where most of the interaction of the student is going to be with other students in large lecture classes, then it may be less important. But in all cases, if an interview is offered, we recommend that you do it. And if cost is a consideration, getting onto campus is a consideration, that the rule should be that if it's within 1 day's driving distance, you should make the effort and do the interview. But schools are also doing things for students who are under-resourced, such as Skype interviews, and take advantage of those and call the admission office and ask if they will consider that. And alumni interviews as well. Those are often done locally. Yes, you should. You must be proactive about it. The university will not contact you and ask you if you would like to have an interview. And you should start with the website before you call the admission office. Almost all the schools that offer interviews, and even those that don't, will have a stated policy on their website. So go to the website and then follow their directions for how they want to see you proceed in terms of setting up that appointment, and do it with plenty of time in advance because their slots do get filled up. They also often have policies about how and when they will conduct them. Some will not interview before the end of junior year. In some cases, you have to have your application in before they will interview, but they usually have very clear stated policies on their websites, and if there's any question, just call up the admission office and your regional representative and ask them.
Okay, if students are undeclared, how does that impact admissions decisions, especially given institutional goals when colleges are have some kind of a formula that they're trying to fill their next class with certain types of kids?
So sorry, but it depends on the school. But for most, the vast majority of high school students applying to college are undeclared. You know, they don't yet know what they want to do. And we're lucky in this country because we have so many colleges that do a great job with students who don't yet know what they want to do. That's the whole purpose of a liberal arts college. Well, that's not the whole purpose, but it's one of the things that they do really well. And so it generally does not hurt you. Now, that doesn't mean that a school might not be looking for female physicists that year, but that's different from, you know, we want to take this many here and that many there. And you know, so I feel like I'm fumbling this answer, but really it does not hurt you to be undecided. And I think that I hear a lot of advice at times where they say, where somebody says you need to put down something. I think what you don't want to do is appear disinterested in everything. But as long as in your application it's coming through that you actually are interested in things, I think you're fine.
So is it a problem to be interested in everything? What if a kid genuinely has a lot of interest? Does that come across as scattered? Or?
It depends on how they, I think it's great if they're interested in everything. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. My teenager has a 504 plan for ADD and has difficulty with some aspects of learning. What's the best way to handle this in the college application process?
You should look at the, there are various ways to find out what a school's attitude is about students who have learning disabilities such as ADD. And one of the ways that you can do that is by going onto the website and seeing what kind of support services they have for students along those lines. It's a family decision about whether to disclose and when to disclose in the process. And it's up to your family and how comfortable you are with it. But you should keep in mind that the sooner you disclose, the easier it will be to arrange for the services that your student may need. I feel like I'm missing. Oh, it's illegal to discriminate against students with learning disabilities, so don't worry about disclosing. But it may be a sensitive matter to your student, and it also probably depends upon how serious the disability or learning difference is and whether or not they're going to require a lot of services from the university.
So, and I'll just add to that a little bit. The line typically is that a learning challenge or a learning difference does not compensate for an inability to do the work at a certain level. But if you can do the work at that level, no matter how you do it, if you've got a learning challenge and you do extended time or whatever it is, then that's just fine. So I would see students from time to time who, you know, would say, well, my grades aren't as good because I have a learning challenge. Well, I'm sympathetic, but, you know, they need to be, if you're at a college where, if you're applying to a college that expects good grades, you have to have the grades. But how you get those grades can be consistent with what is offered to students who have a learning difference. Is that helpful?
Can you throw some light on merit scholarships?
Can you say a little bit more about, can someone fill in that question just a little bit more?
That was an actual question. Anybody want to add to that? Throw some light on merit scholarships as opposed to need-based? What's the question, how to find them?
Okay, well, just in general then, that's a question that you should ask the admission office. And many of them will be upfront about what their policy is, and for instance, at Stanford, it's only for financial need. They don't offer straight merit scholarships. And if the answer isn't available through the admission office, which you call, I guess, you'd call the Office of Financial Aid and ask them what their policy is about merit scholarships. And it will be on the website as well. So check the website of each college to which you are applying.
Okay. When is the best time to start researching and or deciding on colleges? 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade? Kindergarten?
The comment was, I'm glad they started with high school. Nursery school is too soon. So what we say in the book, and we're big believers, you've got to spend some time actually doing high school. Take 9th grade and do high school. Take 10th grade and do high school. 11th grade, thank you. 11th grade, probably time to start thinking about it more seriously and kind of getting things in motion. But you have to, you have to do some living in the moment.
This, I think, is for seniors. How many private colleges consider first quarter grades senior year?
Most of them.
Do you know any that don't? Semester or first quarter?
Oh.
So I think the question is first quarter versus first semester. I'm guessing that, just based on some of the questions I've had recently, I'm guessing that's what the question is about. And in my experience, for quarter grades, not first semester grades in senior year, it's for some students who've applied early, and it's on a case-by-case basis. It depends on the student, and it depends on the college. There's not like a hard line.
Okay, are only the top 10% of any given class admitted into the Ivy League schools, Stanford, or top UC schools?
No.
Okay. Despite the rumors over the broccoli in Safeway, despite the rumors over the broccoli bin at Whole Foods. Yeah. If a student is born in the U.S. but whose parents are from China, and they speak Chinese at home, if he takes Chinese instead of Spanish or French, does that look like he's taking an easy way out?
That's an excellent question. And it depends on the school, because they're each going to read that differently. And it also depends on what you're doing with that Chinese class. And it also depends on whether you yourself grew up speaking Chinese or whether you were in a home that asked you to speak and concentrate on English, and now you're really excited to learn that language. So it's, it also depends on the kind of effort you put in and what you make of it while you're there, and how you talk about why you made that choice. So there's no easy answer. I guess what I would say is, if you are doing it to take the easy way out, it's probably going to show. And if you're doing it for good reasons, that's probably going to show as well. You want to add to
Okay, here's one on extracurricular activities. My child's extremely shy and does not have any extracurricular activities. How detrimental is this going to be in the college process? Is it going to be impossible for him or her to be accepted even with a high GPA and self-test scores?
At some schools, yes. And what I would say is those schools may not be the best school for that student because they're going to have all people in them. You know, that student's not going to have any, like, shy friends, right? So that's going to be a drag. So they want to go to a school that that doesn't look at it that way. I will tell you that admission officers are constantly trying to overcome their own biases, unconscious biases. So every year at Stanford, we spent 3 full days in January learning more. And so, for example, at Stanford, there is specifically a Shyness Institute. And as a staff, we had someone from the Shyness Institute come in and talk with us for several hours about shyness and what goes into shyness and how shyness can be manifested in different things and what happens to shyer students when they're there, et cetera. So it's not, so there are certainly places where shyness is not going to at all be a detriment. There are other places where it will. But there are some colleges that make it very clear that what they value in the admission process has nothing to do with how outgoing you are or how many clubs you manage to join. And so the important thing is, again, to start with who the student is and then to look for colleges that value who your student is.
Okay, this is a good one. If colleges are looking for students that know themselves, how do they look at students that are honestly just trying to explore what they're really interested in?
If you're trying to explore what you're really interested in, that's still knowing yourself. It's not that you have to already know everything about yourself. It's that you have to be engaged in that process of asking yourself the questions that are part of leading a reflective life. And that's going to come out in your application process and in the schools that you end up finding yourself attracted to. But not knowing what you want to do, that's important to know, because then you don't want to go to a school that is going to say, when you come in, you have to enter into a specific college, and even if you change your mind about what you want to study, you're stuck in that college or you have to apply to another one within our university. So that's part of knowing who you are, is knowing whether you know what you want to do or you're still very open.
On a related note, everybody talks about finding a good fit for your student. What's your best advice to how to really go about finding that good fit?
It's research. It's what Robin referred to in her talk. It's understanding who you are and then digging into these colleges and paying attention to what they are. And you start at the most elemental levels, you know, do you want something rural or urban? Do you want something large or small? Do you want something with an NCAA Division I football team or, you know, intramural sports? But you've got to go much deeper than that. You've got to look at how they teach. You've got to look at how you learn and see whether, remember, you're going to spend most of your time in the classroom. You want to really understand how you're going to interact with the learning process at that school. And the fit, are you a social person? Do you want to be a Greek system, in a school with a Greek system, or a school with a lot of independent political organizations? And look at it in every aspect, and there are a lot of ways to do that. The internet is a great way. The college's websites start there. Many people associated with universities blog now, so you can get other ideas about it. There are lots of opinion websites. We'd suggest that you go there later after getting the story from the university itself. And, campus visits are really important in understanding the culture and having that gut reaction to a school to see whether it's going to be a good fit. And when you're visiting, you want to do things like look at the bulletin boards, pick up the newspaper, and schools are more than willing to have you talk to students and faculty on campus so that you can get a feeling about whether it's going to be a good fit for you. It's a research project. It's like another AP course.
Okay, I'm conscious of time, but I'm also conscious that we've got a pretty full room. What I'd like to do is end this part of the discussion with one question from a student, which I think is very good. And then we'll take a very short break. If you want to stay, we'll go to the open mic, and you can come down and ask your questions directly. We'd ask you to come right down here. And I think our panelists are willing to stay a bit longer, but we also want to give you the chance to, if you need to get up and leave, you can leave. But let me give you this one last question from a student. I read that colleges don't want to hear essays on the 3 Ds, death, drugs, and depression. Are there any other overly cliched topics to stay away from?
Sex. Seriously, it is amazing how many students think it's okay to write about that. And I would say, sex is very good to stay away from. And I even think first love, boyfriend, girlfriend, it's just not the best choice. In the book, we do have kind of a box on what not to write. And do you want to?
Okay, some of my favorites that I heard from the deans were the rap sheet, no essays about illegal activity, such as tipping over porta potties.
We got that at Stanford. True.
The complaint. Don't whine or complain about your life, your parents, your teachers, your coach, ethnic food, or anything else. The stand-up routine. Don't be funny unless you're really funny and more than your immediate family has told you that you're here's something really important. Pass up any topic that calls attention to any deep personal biases or disrespect for your parents, pomposity, or contempt for any group of people. The term paper, don't get lazy and submit your essay on the heart of darkness. And the lie, do not try it. It's been tried, it doesn't work. My favorite one was Run Robin had, where the son wrote about his father dying of cancer, and Stanford wasn't happy, and neither was the father when he found out.
Okay, so that's pretty loud. I want to let you know that we value your questions, and what we're going to do is we're going to take those, and our Pally staff will answer all of your questions, and we'll put it up online on a PDF for you. Give us a couple of days, maybe a week, and we'll do that for you. I also want to thank the Media Center gentleman that's up there. Thank you for your time tonight. There will be a DVD of this. We'll try to put a link so that you can see that. You can also view it from the Media Center. And we thank you very much for your time. Before you leave, can we give our guests one big round of applause again? And I want to thank again our PTSA for providing our community with this opportunity. Thank you. Have a nice evening.